Everyone, it's Lucy from My Crazy Craft Life, and I'm here today with a card I made for the Daily Markers 30-Day Coloring Challenge. I used Concord 9th Hello Lovely stamp. It's one of my favorites. I probably have used this stamp more than any other. And I also used some Distress Oxide inks as well as Perfect Pearls to do the coloring with this. I have to say I really enjoy working with Perfect Pearls. The shine and the sheen that goes along with it is amazing, and it's very, very simple to work with. All you need is a little palette, a few drops of water, and a paintbrush, and you are good to go. So with the background, with the Distress Oxides, I just blended some color in there just to give it some color. The Perfect Pearls, I pulled out a couple greens, a turquoise, uh, a dark blue, a purple, and yellow and one red that I ended up using. And like I said, very simple. You just pop some of the powder into the palette and then add a few drops of water and you are good to go with it. Depending on the amount of water you use, depends how concentrated the coloring will be or the color that you're adding to it. And what's nice about Perfect Pearls is it already has the additive that's going to make it secure, a binding element, so that it will bind with the picture and you don't have to worry about spraying it with some type of binding agent. I end up also using quite a bit of the Perfect Pearls going through this. I use a couple different color greens for the different types of leaves, as well as combining the greens to make kind of a different color with it. And I also let it dry. I let it dry completely, and then I went over the entire thing again with the coloring just to make sure. Now I ended up using Nina 110-pound cardstock. I did not use watercolor paper, and because you're not using a ton of water and you're not really saturating this type of paper, I think it works just fine. I also used the heat gun when after I finished coloring the entire thing, just to make sure it was completely dry before I added it to the card. When I stamped the image, I also heat embossed it with clear embossing powder. I used VersaFine black onyx ink, and then I just used clear embossing powder. Makes it a little bit easier to make sure you're kind of coloring within the lines, I guess you want to say. One of my favorite things about the stamp set itself is it's such a large image. That's really the only thing you need, along with a sentiment to add onto the card, and that's pretty much all you need. You cut it down, put it on a card base. For this particular card, I made a standard A2 size card that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I used some die cut words in order to use those for the sentiment, and I ended up using Believe. I cut it out 3 times with some black cardstock, and then I glued them together just to kind of make it a thicker, kind of like a piece of chipboard. And then, like I said, I did make sure that I colored the images a couple times to make sure that the colors were real vibrant. I did use the darker blue inside of the center of the flower and then the lighter turquoise blue on kind of the outside of the flower. I also used Spectrum Noir Sparkle Pen, used it over the Believe sentiment after I adhered it to the card base, and then I cut it down so that it was actually a full inch shorter or smaller than the actual card base, so then it gave me a 1/2 inch all the way around the card base. I also used Nuvo drops on this card after I was finished putting the card together, and I also popped up the entire image with some fun foam. When I used between the watercoloring or coloring with the water and the heat gun, it kind of warped the cardstock a little bit, so I wanted to make sure it had a really solid foundation so that it didn't warp on the card after I put it down. So I made sure that that was completely taped down to the entire panel that was going to go on the front of the card base, and then I made sure that the back of it had the entire thing all taped to make sure again that it didn't kind of fold up. I used a black card base. I thought that went really well with the coloring as well as the stamping since I did the outline in the black. And then I used, like I said, the die cut Believe sentiment, and I used black cardstock for that as well. And then I did use the Spectrum Noir sparkle pen all over the Believe sentiment after I put it down there. So I think overall I loved how this card came out. I love the sparkle on the card. There was nothing too crazy done with this card. It was a pretty simple. I simply stamped it, I heat embossed it, I used the Perfect Pearl, and then just kind of cut out the card panel and put the whole thing onto the card base, and that is about all that I did for this entire card. I'm really excited that so far I've been keeping up. We're on day 6 of the Daily Markers 30-day coloring challenge, and I'm pretty impressed with that. I also added a panel on the inside of the black cardstock just so that I could write the sentiment or whatever I ended up wanting to do with the inside of the card. And I've realized I'm really not good at figuring out what I want to do for the next day or the day after, because every day when I sit down, I think it depends more on my mood and how I feel with what I'm going to end up doing, as opposed to, oh, I have to get this done. So for me, it just works best every day when I sit down, I look through my stuff and decide what I do. So I'm having a really good time with the Daily Marker Challenge, and I think it's really cool. So that is all I have. I want to thank everyone for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you give Perfect Pearls a try because I do really enjoy working with them. I want to thank everyone for joining me, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks and take care.